I pay tribute to all the members who served on, I think it was the 21 committee sessions, and obviously their job was made harder by the fact that this was rushed legislation brought forward purely to spare the blushes of the Deputy Prime Minister who'd made promises to the trade union barons who fund her party. And as a result, we've seen the large number of amendments that we're discussing today. And it's also the case that while the government has consulted during the passage of this bill, it doesn't appear to have listened to employers very much. And honourable members should be aware of the unintended consequences of these measures and this bill. But turning to the amendments, given the government's apparent priority is growth, new clause 87 is an essential addition. Many of the powers in the bill will be implemented through regulations, which clearly the House, employers and employees do not have any detail of. The approach again shows the rushed nature of the legislation, common throughout passages of other bills with regulations we passed in draft while the clauses implementing them were considered. That hasn't happened in this case. So therefore it's wholly sensible to require that when making regulations, ministers must have regard to the international competitiveness of the economy. As honourable members know, the government inherited the fastest growing economy in the G7. But since then, what's happened? Their actions, their words, have stopped growth stone dead. So as well as competitiveness, the government should take into account economic growth in the medium and long term. That's essential. And my concern, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the government is treating businesses like the mule in Buckaroo, loading on more and more costs and obligations. But anyone who's played the game will know that it's inevitable there will be a reaction and the mule will buck. And in economic terms, that means fewer jobs, higher prices, lower wages. And the government's own impact assessment gives a cost of business of £5 billion a year. That simply cannot be absorbed by companies, so new clause 87 would offer some protection. And many honourable members have spoken about the extension of employment provisions to day one, and I recognise the extension of unfair dismissal is well-intentioned. However, the reality is this increases the risk to employers of taking people on. The Federation of Small Businesses has said the increased risk will inevitably deter small employers from taking on people for fear of facing an employment tribunal simply because a new recruit turns out to be unsuited to the role. That's bad for people, it's bad for jobs, it's bad for investment and it's bad for growth. So new clause 86 requires the Secretary of State to assess the impacts of extending the provisions in clause 21, with Parliament having to approve them. This parliamentary lock is about protecting the chance young people, ex-offenders, other vulnerable groups have to join the workforce, as otherwise firms may simply not take a chance on them. And part-time work will particularly be hit by this bill. And of course, these measures are on top of the government's £25 billion a year jobs tax, which is making 750,000 jobs in the hospitality sector subject to employer national insurance for the very first time, £1 billion cost for that sector. And these are the very type of flexible roles that are well suited, for example, as my right honourable friend mentioned earlier, for people who are on long-term sickness benefits who might be looking to move back into the workplace. And the bill undermines all of that. And the third area I want to focus on is around flexible working and the provisions on guaranteed hours, and in that context, new clause 28 tabled by the government. Here, I think, again, it is worth listening to business leaders who've warned about the unintended consequences. The Chief Executive of Currys, for example, has said guaranteed hours measures will penalise younger workers and millions who benefit from flexible hours, making such jobs less viable and businesses less competitive. You don't need to be a retailer or even an economist or a lawyer to know that stores and leisure and hospitality businesses have seasons. It's particularly the case in my North West Norfolk constituency. So companies have to plan to have the right size of workforce at different times of the year. And these measures damage that by... I will give way.
It appears to be being quite commonly overlooked on the other benches that flexible working will still be available for people through fixed-term contracts. Does he agree that these can be used to manage seasonal fluctuations?
Simply pointing to the words from Curry's chief executive, who employs thousands of people across the country. I'm not here to tell them the form of contract to have. I'm not sure it's the job of the Honourable Lady to tell those employers which contracts they should be offering their staff. But it's certainly the case that they'll be removing the flexibility. And the government is doubling down by extending those to agency workers. And the flexible contracts that are valued by the staff, we've heard contributions from this side talking about the benefits of that, will be undermined by this bill. And having a flexible labour market is an important part of securing a growing economy. And under the last government, we managed to achieve that whilst also extending employment rights. But the clear danger from this bill, the warnings from the Federation of Small Business and others, who represent the people actually providing millions of jobs, is that this will make it harder to employ people. It will increase the risks and the costs. And rather than striking the balance that my honourable friend, the Shadow Minister, spoke about, the government's produced measures which, taken together and on top of the Chancellor's tax-raising budgets and nearly doubling the business rates for hospitality, retail and leisure businesses, create a significant cost and regulatory risk. That's why we oppose this bill and the action the government is taking to hike taxes and increase regulation that makes us less competitive.